ready to break down some Husker recruiting, and what better time to do it than when Nebraska has one of their biggest recruiting weekends of all time. I mean, the star power of this, as far as at least recruiting profiles, is really crazy. So we'll welcome in, as tradition, Bryan Munson on 3 and Husker Online. Bryan, how's it going today?
Hey, I'm doing well. We're getting ready to do a lot of work the rest of the weekend, covering all the guys he just mentioned, covering all the things we're going to talk about here.
Oh, I bet it's going to be a busy weekend for you.
You're not busy at all. What are you talking about?
just almost 30 recruits to cover over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, I don't see any problems with that whatsoever. Seems pretty simple, actually.
Yeah, right.
Now, I wanted to get this out of the way out of the gate because somebody asked it earlier. Are these all unofficial visits?
They are. The official visit schedule doesn't kick off until a little bit later on. This is Virginia Day unofficial visit. Probably would be, like some NIL implications here for some folks, obviously for kids that come from those states where it's legal to kind of have that. Ultimately, this is all unofficial, traveling on their own dime.
All right. Well, that's very interesting. And of course, Dylan Raiola is the big name coming into town. But I wanted to ask first about Ryan Wingo. Is he a late addition, or we knew about him coming through for a while?
No, I've known about Ryan for a while. It's really kind of interesting, obviously, that this has come up, because I think I remember when I confirmed Ryan. It's been at least 2 or 3 weeks now that he's been on there, but he's been jumping around on our visitor list because like, you got to put it down like a specific day. You don't get actually, I confirmed him on March 7th.
Yeah.
So known about it for going on about 3 weeks. He's jumping around on our visitor list because he's showing up on the 24th, not on the 25th. So we've got like 25 guys showing up on the 25th date, 2 guys showing up on the 24th date. So Wingo and Rhule are sitting down there. So you got to kind of move around the on-3 visitor list a little bit between Friday and Saturday to see everybody that's there. But yeah, we've known about him now for about 3 weeks.
Of all the recruits that are coming in to visit, who is your sleeper, like a guy that maybe isn't being talked about enough?
That's a good one. Well, it's really tough to to exclude a lot of these players because they're so big, and I think that it's. I'm gonna go with the 2 offensive tackles. I'm gonna go with 2 offensive tackles. I'm gonna go with Andrew Sprague and Gage Ginther. I think we all know where the offensive line situation is at currently for Nebraska right now, where they got like 10 healthy guys. You're going to get 4 more guys, at the end of the school year, all high school players. Offensive tackle is a huge lead in the 2024 group, and I think when you get looking at this list, you're starstruck. You get Dylan Raiola, you're going to get your Gatlin Bitters, your Ryan Wingos, your Carter Nelsons, Nathaniel Frasers, etc., and on and on and on and on. And I think obviously people want to stop and talk about Brandon Baker. Brandon Baker is #1 offensive tackle in the country. I understand why you want to go ahead and do that. Andrew Sprague is making a return visit. I think this is his 3rd trip to Nebraska, and I'm pretty sure Ginther has been to Nebraska at least twice before, possibly more. And he has quite the connection back to the state because his dad actually played at the University of Nebraska at Kearney in the early 90s. So he has got some ties. I'm gonna go with the 2 offensive tackles that nobody's talking about in Sprague and Ginther as being really underlooked commodities in the weekend's class.
We're speaking of Bryan Munson on 3 Husker Online. And Bryan, I know, a lot of these guys are extremely highly rated. Most of these guys are extremely highly rated. So to me, I'm not expecting to see, commitments to Nebraska directly after this weekend, maybe a couple weeks down the line. But if I said 3 of the guys visiting this weekend committed before the spring game to Nebraska, would that be surprising?
I think so, yeah. You're just in this time frame right here where the spring is really about determining where you're going to go take your official visits in the month of June. There could be a couple of commits. I mean, I think like Ian Flint, would make some sense. The tight end from Katy, Texas. I think Gibson Pyle, I think he's accelerating his timeline a little bit. The offensive lineman from Houston, Texas. I just don't feel like it though after that because all these guys have got dates to go to other places. They're all talking about taking official visits. I just feel like that acceleration just isn't there for the rest of these guys. I feel really good about a number of these players ending up, in the signing class for Nebraska. I mean, that's like the one big thing. I don't want to sit there and like rope off a bunch of names and tell you who I think are going to be the guys that are going to be there, or the guys who I feel like right now are the least realistic to end up signing with Nebraska. But I feel pretty good that Nebraska is going to get some of these guys. It's just not going to happen, I think, to your point, this weekend. I don't think it happens in the month leading up to the spring game, but I think it's going to happen sometime, between who the guys that come back for the official visits in June and the guys that come off the board between that date and probably like the middle of July.
Now, Matt Rhule he's told us multiple times how he wants to get guys in to watch practices because he wants them to see him in that environment. He wants them to see what they're going to be doing pretty much when they do, if they do end up committing and attending Nebraska. Have you heard back from some of the recruits that have been able to see practice and what their thoughts are?
Well, I mean, I talked to like McGahee and I talked to Caden Massey. I think they both had some pretty important things to say about, how things went, watching practice that day. I really feel like though it's the opinion of Stone Saunders, and he's a 2025 quarterback. He was already at Nebraska. I think it was like end of January, and he came back again. And I pull up his quotes here really quick because I felt like it was super telling. He said practice was fast paced. It was fast paced, but with still high standards and attention to detail. And then he mentioned exactly what he said. Coach Rhule him up. He was completely into it. He could start every play. He said he was impressed and that they were quote unquote practicing with purpose. I felt like that was about a good a read about, any recruit's assessment as to how practices were going so far, or at least how involved the head coach was, how things were not rusty, getting off the ground with a new coaching staff or whatever. They hit the ground running. I mean, Caden Massey and Willis McGahee, they were expecting for some problems, for some things to go wrong. They didn't see that. And obviously, this was day two when Stone Saunders was there, and he was just as impressed and saw Matt Rhule out there leading the drills himself. So really good comments so far all the way around from the recruits that have been to Nebraska so far this week.
And Stone Saunders, his name around a little bit too. Is he their primary 2025 quarterback target right now?
He's the name that's out there at the moment. Obviously, Nebraska and Coach Rhule, they've all got really, really tight ties back to that part of the country. And the high school, obviously, that Stone is from, Harrisburg, Bishop McDevitt is I think what it is. They've all got ties back to that part of the country. He's obviously a national, kind of guy when it comes to his recruiting. His film is great. He's not going to overwhelm you when it comes to his size. He's not a 6'4" guy, but he can throw the ball. I mean, and he is going to go check out like Notre Dame and Clemson and Georgia and Tennessee. I mean, he has got some teams absolutely looking at him. It's just, you got to kind of see the arm whip, you got to see the arm strength, you got to see all the throws and all the route trees that he's got, and then just not get too caught up on the fact, that he's not a 6'4", 6'5" guy.
Now, of this weekend's list of visitors, I wanted to ask you first of all: is it around? What's the total number that they have that you guys have confirmed?
Let's see. I was just looking at that just 1 second ago. You did have one 2023 5 guy, Isaiah Mosey, coming in. He is from the same high school as Williams Nawarni. So you're adding one 2025 guy in. You've got 25, 26, 28 is what I know of right now that are in town. And actually 29. The long snapper from Pinnacle High School is there with John Raiola too. The number one long snapper in high school is there too. So just south of 30.
And this is obviously with the number one player in the nation in town. This is got to be somewhat new. But do you remember a weekend like this with past coaching staffs that was able to get the type of star power that they are just this weekend?
Never. I mean, quantities have kind of gotten close to 20 sometimes, like for some junior days, maybe some official visit weekends. I think we got really close to that. I think one time in December with that Rhule, I think it was like 18, 19. Nothing in terms of this quantity, nothing in terms of this quality. I think people would want to go back maybe and point the finger at like Friday Night Lights, Calabrasca movements under Coach Riley. They don't come close. They do not come close to here. And obviously, I think hindsight 2020, they're a little bit. But I think in terms of just overall number of 5 stars, number of 4 stars, the mix of where these players is from is truly interesting. You're getting it from the Northeast, from the West Coast, from Texas, all the way through the 500-mile radius. I think that's one thing that's getting overlooked. I think it's incredibly important. But yeah, there's never been another weekend like this that I can recall.
Yeah, it's crazy just to have these guys targeted. It usually doesn't seem like Nebraska's in on some of these top guys. I want to ask you about Williams Nwaneri. If you could say the name, I already can't screw it up. But he's the number 9 player according to On3 in the nation. I know they kind of talk about a lean. In Nebraska, maybe not quite heavily in the mix. For some of these guys, is this kind of the visit to get Nebraska in the mix, or more prominently in the discussion to land them?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really what the wins. You're not going to get those commits this weekend. Here's what you got to do. You've got to get them turning their attitude and opening their eyes a little bit more towards Nebraska. Williams Nawarni's been in Nebraska. This is his 3rd or his 4th time. He almost basically ruled Nebraska out a year ago before his head coach and head coach's son, which is his teammate, went up there in January and told Williams, hey, things are changing. This was about the time that Bill Bush and Mickey Joseph and Brian Applewhite were being brought on staff. So they were seeing some changes happening there. And then obviously Coach Rhule now is rededicated, to recruit in the Kansas City area. And I think that's where you got to kind of go ahead and get started. You have to get back to things are different. Here's how they're different. Here's why they're different. Here's where we're going. Here's the bigger picture. Give me some time to kind of show you this and demonstrate this a little bit. But yeah, this is what that weekend is going to be about. It's going to be about Nebraska moving up some people's boards, some of their lists, and making sure that they can get them back on campus again, hopefully for the spring game and again for an official visit. Those are the big 2 next milestones that Nebraska's trying to fill up with these guys.
All right, we've put it off long enough. It's time to talk some Dylan Raiola. What is, Dylan we know has taken quite a bit of unofficial visits here. Another one here. I know he's got I believe I already got an official visit, his first one lined up with Georgia. Do you expect to see Nebraska to obviously to get at least one of those official visits? And what do you think kind of is the goal here? Because it seems with this big recruiting, effort, you hope a couple of these guys just befriend each other and love the vibe here in Nebraska.
Totally. I mean, this is about getting a chance to see Nebraska, meet the number 1 player in the nation, talk about how serious he is about Nebraska, what he kind of sees and what he's kind of thinking and feeling about Nebraska. He's already scheduled to come back from Nebraska's spring game, and Willis McGahee IV, who was on campus on Monday, drops me a line and says, I'm coming back for the spring game too because I want to meet him. It changes a lot of things, even for the defenders, as part of the class, if the number 1 quarterback in the nation is going to end up going there. It's a total game changer. So that's exactly what's going to happen. You're hoping for these social situations where these guys are going to get a chance to talk to one another, figure out like what guys are really thinking about, what their process really looks like, understanding like what their timelines really are, and then staying in touch with one another and trying to get back and do it again. Dylan, like I said, Dylan's going to be there in April. Like you said, first official visit appears to be set. It's going to Georgia. I totally anticipate Nebraska is going to get that chance to host that official visit, and I think Nebraska would want to work that out with Dylan to figure out what guys from this weekend, what guys from spring game weekend, what guys from other weekends could they potentially bring in and allow them to have some more time together to talk things through, to talk about Nebraska while they're there in like their official visit in June.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. If you believe that, Dylan can get some of these guys to go here, but from the sounds of it, at the same time, if you don't end up getting Dylan, then maybe you lose interest from some of these guys. Is there a particular guy, maybe like the wide receivers, the Ryan Wingos the Ryan Pelhams that you're looking out, that would be particularly somebody that Dylan's pretty close to in this weekend visit, or is this has that not really been established yet as to one of his primary buddies?
I think Baker, Brandon Baker, I think that Nathaniel Frazier, I think that they're really, they're going to be linked. I think with Raiola a little bit. I think Tom is another guy that you had mentioned before. Wingo is definitely a guy that's interested in hearing about what's going on with Raiola. I think all of them, even like Carter Nelson, has got a general interest in what's kind of going on with Dylan Raiola and how he gets it in the class. So I think the California guys in particular are the ones that I would look for to try to get something out of to see, how things went with them and Dylan, and see if you can get anything about like what's being said behind the scenes.
Fascinating stuff, as always, with this weekend in particular. Thanks once again to Bryan Munson of On3 and Husker Online for joining us and getting us prepared for the weekend. We will all it feels like a game day weekend almost with how big this recruiting weekend is. Thanks for joining us again, Bryan.
You bet, guys. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. There it goes. Bryan Munson of Husker Online and On3. We love him joining us every Friday